David Ortiz makes it to the Baseball Hall of Fame on his first year of eligibility. He won 77.9% of the vote, right above the 75% needed to get into the Hall of Fame. So, of course, the natural question is he a first ballot Hall of Famer? What are your guys' reactions?
Yes, absolutely. I think he's being overshadowed greatly by the names that didn't get in. And I think for reasons that are legitimate. I think there's concerns about Ortiz's PED use, even though he was part of that false positive group potentially that is very controversial. Even Rob Manfred has cut Ortiz some slack when reflecting on that era of baseball. But I look at what the guy did in his time in Boston. And it's incredible. Career home runs at 541, 10-time All-Star, 3-time World Series champ, 7-time Silver Slugger, and he's a career 289 hitter in the postseason. The guy was the definition of clutch. If you were watching Boston Red Sox baseball during that era, you knew without a doubt that when push came to shove, David Ortiz was the type of player who would come up in big spots. He did it in 04 against the Yankees team that was up by 3 games in the ALCS. He did it multiple times during the 07 run. Then in 2013, the infamous year in which the city really rallied around that Red Sox team after the Boston Marathon bombings, of course, Ortiz giving a very interesting speech at Fenway Park, one that I don't think we could play on this program, but definitely worth giving a listen to just to see what type of leader he was and how much Boston meant to him. And that World Series run, of course, laden with many moments of greatness from Ortiz. My favorite baseball moment actually comes as he takes on the Tigers. Down big in the game, Joaquin Benoit comes out, bases loaded. Ortiz hits a grand slam. The cop has his hands in the air in right field. Torrey Hunter goes flying over the fence. Fenway goes nuts. So, yeah, in my opinion, David Ortiz is the definition of a Hall of Famer from a Red Sox perspective. From a baseball perspective, the numbers are there as well. But if you're looking at it from Red Sox history, there's no way you can tell the story of the Boston Red Sox without mentioning David Ortiz and the sheer amount of numbers and the sheer amount of moments he had. So for that reason, I think he's well deserving.
You know what? I'm going to have to agree as well. I think when you look at a player like Big Papi, you look at the face of a franchise. He is the face of the franchise for the past 20 so years. When you think of the Red Sox, you think of him. He is so charismatic and embodies that spirit of the Red Sox, I think, more than ever before. And it would be always a pleasure to see him in those Yankees-Red Sox games, to see his energy, to see his drive. And like you mentioned, the criticism really just comes in with his regular season stats. And even then, I think they're moderate. I think they're okay. We mentioned the playoffs really being the time where he shines. And I think it is undeniable with his statistics in the postseason that he is a Hall of Famer. I think when you look at everything he had accomplished in the postseason, he had 17 home runs in the postseason. He had 61 runs. Those 61 runs apparently are the 4th in all-time postseason history. You know, when you have a player like that, and you have a player that consistently led a team to a World Series, it's hard to deny him based on this steroid, this PED usage. And I know it's very controversial because there are, in my opinion, 2 big no-nos in baseball. Number 1 is no gambling. Number 2 is no drugs. The no drugs has been stretched thin throughout the past couple of years. I know you mentioned the kind of dismissal of the 2003 drug test. I think that whole involvement is very sketchy scenario. So that's highly debated. I can't then pinpoint if that's legitimate enough to not let him in. I think if that's going to be the basis, you have to hold a little bit more proof to this supposed drug test. In comparison, we look at other players on the ballot. We saw, Barry Bonds, you see Curt Schilling, you see all these players, Roger Clemens, and you have to wonder, okay, is their drug usage more extreme than David Ortiz? And if so, that is what should be holding them back from this Hall of Fame ballot. And we saw this year, unfortunately, they didn't make the cut. I can't say I'm too upset about it. I think when you look at that controversy, you have to expect your players to be on that statistical value and what kind of liberties they brought to the era of the time. And I think the argument for me comes down to, is it fair to choose only certain eras of Barry Bonds' career, of Roger Clemens' career, to then put them in the Hall of Fame and then try and omit those drug usage eras? To me, it's just not fair.
And speaking of Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, the other big news is baseball's all-time home run leader and the pitcher who's won the most Cy Youngs will not be in the Hall of Fame because this year was their 10th and final year of eligibility on the baseball writers ballot, and they both failed to hit the 75% mark that's needed. The two other big names that are from that group are Curt Schilling and Sammy Sosa, who both have their off-the-field issues overshadow what they did on the field. How do you guys think about this?
I think it comes down to personality. I love David Ortiz as a player, but I'm well aware that part of the reason he probably got some sympathetic votes was because he was a likable guy. He's the lovable big guy from Boston that came up clutch. Clemens, Bonds, and Schilling, not so much. Now, obviously, if you're going by pure numbers, these guys deserve to get in, especially Clemens, the most Cy Youngs, and Bonds, the most home runs. PED use aside, if you're looking at this as purely a numbers game, those guys deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. Where it gets a little bit dicey for me is that their personalities did not help baseball at all. And the PED stuff does not help baseball at all. I think that might be where the Ortiz issue becomes more clear, is when you look at guys like this, in that Ortiz might have done PEDs at one time. We don't know for how long. We don't know if it was as extreme as Barry Bonds or Clemens or any of these other guys. But what we do know is he didn't hurt the image of baseball. These guys and Alex Rodriguez, I think they hurt the image of baseball. I think that's something that the writers did consider, whether they knew it or not. I think it's a subconscious thing, because I can't honestly tell you that I see objectively Ortiz in the same light as Bonds. I think Bonds hurt baseball for the steroid usage. And I think someone like Schilling is an even greater example of this. The guy had maybe one of the most heroic starts in postseason history, and it is forgotten because of just how big of a problem he's been after he retired. And for those reasons, I really can't get too mad at the writers for not voting them in. I think if you voted Ortiz in, you have to consider voting these guys in. It shouldn't be an easy choice. I think maybe there's an argument to be made that they should have been voted in. I probably would have voted in Bonds because of the numbers he had pre-steroids. I think those were good enough on their own. Now, whether or not you're willing to just take that and not take the ugly side of this is another argument, Maddie, that you had brought up earlier. We can certainly talk about that. But I think to not consider these guys and then to vote Ortiz in is hypocrisy. You at least have to give everybody a fair shake. If your argument is that they hurt the game of baseball, then you might be onto something, in my estimation.
I agree. I think the way that the Writers Association has voted also has been very controversial. I remember last year's Hall of Fame with the Derek Jeter nomination, one writer refused to vote for him solely on the basis that they didn't believe he deserved a unanimous vote. And so I think when you are trying to pinpoint the different opinions of these different writers and say, yes, I think this person is deserving because of XYZ, you're never going to get a clear-cut opinion on this drug usage scandal. I think, when you look at Bonds and you look at Clemens, you bring up the fact that their numbers prior to steroid usage were incredible, and that is undeniable to me. I think the numbers are there, and I think that is almost enough for me to put them in there. I think they should be considered 100%. I think a complete dismissal is wrong. However, when I look at the Hall of Fame, I look at it as kind of a career-long or a lifelong achievement award. If you start choosing these seasons were the best for this player versus these seasons were the best for this player, you start to play this game of picking and choosing, and I think you would be able to add too many one-hit wonders into the Hall of Fame then on that basis. So, I am actually open to another idea that I have discussed in the past, which is doing kind of a steroid era wing at the Hall of Fame, where you can focus on these players that have had that controversy, but still give them a certain credit, but make it very well known in the baseball world you don't support PED and steroid usage. Because I think if you start to put everybody in there, start glorifying it slowly by slowly, it could undermine what the value of baseball comes down to with those two major rules of no gambling and don't do drugs.
If you actually take a look at the actual ballot, it's very interesting because you can pull it up by who leads in all-time WAR. Number 1 and number 2 are Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, both over 130. And there's some other notable names on here that didn't make it in. And of that top 5, David Ortiz, he's the only person who got in. Barry Bonds came in second. Roger Clemens, Scott Rowland, and Curt Schilling. Scott Rowland still has 5 years left, but someone who is also in their first year of eligibility in the Hall of Fame is A-Rod. And, of course, he admitted to using PEDs, and it is his first year, but he did not even get 30% of the vote. So he came nowhere close to getting 75%. Is an A-Rod Hall of Fame speech in our future?
Oh, A-Rod. A-Rod. The little slap out of Arroyo's hand in the ALCS in 2004 with the hamburger helper gloves on his head. What did I do? I didn't knock the ball out of his hand. So many issues, making baseball look bad with steroids. I can say this honestly. Alex Rodriguez, the act that he puts on Fox Sports, that's a good guy. I can get with it. He knows his stuff about baseball. He's a decent analyst at times.
I'm with you on that one. I loved him on ESPN.
Right, but the guy that played the game is a different story to me, because I just think he's the prime example of the steroid usage, even more so than McGuire, Bonds, or Sosa, because by the time that A-Rod got busted, they were checking it, which means you had to be really dense to get busted like that, because it wasn't even like he was doing a good job hiding it at that point. And I don't get it. All the complaining that he did about Derek Jeter and that little rivalry, and Jeter not wanting anything to do with it because Jeter's a classy guy. He doesn't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame at all. I understand the 30,000 hits are there. I understand he has the numbers, but if I had to look at somebody who is not helping the game of baseball when he played, it's Alex Rodriguez. I'll give him more credit than Bonds and Schilling in the fact that he is trying to repair his image somewhat. I will give him credit on that. If he continues to do that and he stays on the ballot long enough, maybe the numbers go up. I don't think it's going to be enough to put him in. I personally wouldn't vote for him, but I think there are some people that would be willing to make that concession. And I think he really needs a win, given I had just seen him freezing in Green Bay a week earlier, and Ben Affleck has seemed to have taken over for him now. So a lot going on for Alex Rodriguez, but no, for my money, he's not a Hall of Famer.
It's shocking to me that guy got 34% of the votes, because I am a longtime Alex Rodriguez hater. I can say that confidently. I will say that passionately. I was shocked to see him on the ballot this year, especially after the Jeter year. It's almost like getting slapped in the face if you're Jeter at this point. How do you go from the guy that was in the perfect image of the Yankees organization, did no wrong, was such a great rival to David Ortiz, those retirement ceremonies were so wholesome to watch, and then you put in his arch rival into the Hall of Fame ballot the next year? A-Rod, to me, has done nothing personality-wise for baseball when he played. He just proved that you could be ego-driven and still be good. Like, the numbers are there, like you mentioned. I can't deny that. There's not enough numbers to justify his personality for me. And when you look at him and you look at what he's done for the Yankees, if you already put Jeter in, to me, then I view Jeter as kind of the line of, okay, this is what we got. This is where everybody else should kind of be. A-Rod did not meet that line to me at all. And so, sure, he's trying to repair his image now. That's fine. He can do the analyst job all he wants. I just know for a fact if I was on that ballot, I would never vote for him.
Buck O'Neil, Bud Fowler, Jim Kaat, Tony Olivier, Gil Hodges, and Minnie Minoso round out the Hall of Fame classes. They got in with Veterans Committee selections.